There's a certain kind of silence that hits you when your doctor tells you you're infertile, a silence so loud it drowns out everything else. I sat there, in that tiny, suffocating office, with its peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of antiseptic, while Dr. Whitlock cleared his throat like he hadn't just set my whole life on fire. "0," he said, tapping the report in front of him. "Your sperm count is 0. I blinked. 0 as in low? Or 0 as in none? Not low. None. Things are really happening. Ensure to subscribe and watch to the end. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the story." The world tilted. My head felt light. "But I have 3 kids," I said, a stupid laugh escaping my throat, the kind of laugh you give when you're dangling off the edge of a cliff. "I have 3 sons. You're saying, what exactly?" Dr. Whitlock's face was an unreadable mask, but his eyes carried that familiar look, the same one mechanics give you when they know your car is beyond saving, but don't want to be the ones to break the news. "Mr. Doyle," he said softly, "you have a genetic condition, Klinefelter syndrome. It means you were born with an extra X chromosome. It's extremely unlikely you've ever been able to father children." I stared at him. The walls felt closer now, the air thicker. My sons, Jude, Caleb, and little Finn, their faces flashed in my mind. 7 years old, 5, and 2. All of them with their big brown eyes, dimples, and matching toothy grins. Had I really been raising someone else's kids this whole time? I felt my stomach turn. "Are you sure?" I whispered. Dr. Whitlock gave me a pitying look. "I'm sure." I drove home in a daze, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The world outside blurred past, the pedestrians, the honking cars, the chaotic rush of life, all of it just noise now. When I finally got home, my wife, Mabel, was in the kitchen, humming to herself while chopping vegetables. "Hey, you're back early," she said, flashing me that same smile I used to think was the most beautiful thing in the world. Now, it felt like a weapon, sharp, deceptive. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, watching her, wondering how many lies a person could fit behind a single smile. "Edgar," she asked, frowning now. "Are you okay? Who's their father?" It came out hoarse, broken. Her knife clattered to the counter. "What?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Jude. Caleb. Finn. Who is their father?" The room went deathly quiet. Mabel's face paled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Edgar, what are you talking about?" I let out a bitter laugh. "I'm infertile, Mabel. I've always been infertile. The doctor said I've never been able to have kids, so tell me, whose sons am I raising?" Her eyes welled with tears, but I didn't feel pity, not anymore. This wasn't sadness. It was guilt. And the worst part? I already knew the answer. Mabel didn't answer right away. She just stood there, frozen, like a glitching character in a broken video game. The silence stretched so long I could hear the faint dripping of the kitchen tap. I almost laughed. Our marriage was leaking just like that faucet, slowly at first, then all at once. Finally, she whispered, "Edgar, please, just listen." "Listen." My voice cracked. "To what, Mabel? A bedtime story? A magical tale about how I'm somehow the father of 3 kids despite having a sperm count lower than this kitchen's IQ." Her hand trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter, and for a split second, I thought she might faint. Part of me wanted her to, just so I could be the one standing over her for once, watching her crumble. Instead, she burst into tears. Big, ugly sobs that echoed through the house. I didn't comfort her. I used to. I used to hold her whenever she cried, like when she thought Jude had broken his arm falling off the swing, or when Caleb had a fever that wouldn't break. Back then, every tear she shed felt like mine too. But now, her crying felt performative. "Mabel," I said flatly, "how long?" She blinked, confused. "How long have I been the world's most dedicated babysitter?" I clarified. She flinched. Edgar, please. How long? She wiped her nose with her sleeve. It wasn't like that. How long, Mabel? A shaky breath. Then, Jude. Just his name. I felt my stomach drop. I looked at the staircase, where his muddy sneakers were still lying at the bottom step, the same sneakers I'd told him 1,000 times to put away. Jude. My firstborn. My pride. My reason for believing I was a real man. How long, Mabel? I asked again, my voice hollow. She finally muttered, since before him. I had to grab the back of a chair to steady myself. Before him. So not just Jude. Not just Caleb. Finn too. I wasn't a father. I was a glorified babysitter with a mortgage. I stared at her, at the woman I had loved for over a decade, and realized I didn't know who she was anymore. Who? I asked, my throat dry. Who's their father? Her lips quivered. It doesn't matter. I let out a dark, humorless laugh. It matters to me, Mabel. It really matters. Her silence said everything. Was it one man? I asked. Or was this a team effort? She closed her eyes, more tears spilling down her cheeks. Please, Edgar. I grabbed a glass from the counter and hurled it at the wall. It shattered instantly, pieces flying everywhere, much like our life. Don't please Edgar me, I growled. I've spent years kissing bruised knees, reading bedtime stories, saving for college funds, all for another man's children. Her voice cracked. But they're still your sons. They're not, Mabel. I snapped. They never were. The weight of my own words crushed me. I wasn't a father. I wasn't anything. And the sick part? The boys didn't even know. They still thought I was their hero, the man who lifted them onto his shoulders at the park, who scared away the monsters under their beds, who told them they could be anything they wanted to be. I was a lie dressed as a man. And now I had to decide what the hell I was going to do about it. The days that followed felt like living in a bad dream, the kind where you're running but never moving, screaming but no one hears you. I slept in the guest room. Well, I say slept, but mostly I just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how many times Mabel had kissed me goodnight with another man's children growing inside her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, Jude's cheeky grin, Caleb's furrowed brow when he was concentrating, Finn's little giggles whenever I tickled him. They were still calling me Dad. And it killed me. On the third day, Mabel knocked softly on the guest room door. Edgar, she said, voice hoarse from crying. Please, let's talk. I didn't answer. She came in anyway. I didn't look at her, just kept my gaze fixed on a spot on the wall like it held the meaning of life. I was lonely, she whispered. You were always working, always stressed. I felt forgotten. I blinked. So, what? You unforgot yourself in someone else's bed. Her face crumpled. It wasn't like that. It's exactly like that. She started crying again, those same loud, dramatic sobs that used to break my heart, but now just made me feel numb. I let her cry. When the room finally fell silent again, I said, Who's their father, Mabel? She didn't answer right away. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, it was someone I worked with, years ago. My jaw tightened. Someone? He doesn't have a name. She stared at the floor. I realized then that I didn't actually want to know. It didn't matter if the guy was named John or Peter or even Santa Claus. He wasn't the one who'd stayed up all night rocking a colicky Finn to sleep. He wasn't the one who taught Jude how to ride a bike or Caleb how to tie his shoes. I had been the fool doing all that, smiling through it, thinking I was building a family, not playing house with someone else's kids. Did he know? I asked. Mabel nodded slowly. About Jude, yes. I told him. But when I got pregnant with Caleb, he left. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it was. The real father had run off, and I had picked up the pieces, none the wiser. Are you even sure it was just him? I asked bitterly. Her lips trembled. Yes! I didn't believe her. We sat there in silence for a long time, Mabel sobbing softly into her hands, me still staring at that same spot on the wall. Finally, I said, I want a DNA test for all three of them. She flinched. Edgar. No, don't. My voice was ice. If there's even a chance one of them is actually mine, I need to know. Because deep down, I wasn't ready to let go of the slim, stupid hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't a complete joke. 2 days later, we did the tests. The results arrived in a plain white envelope. I opened it alone in the guest room. 3 names. 3 lines. Jude Doyle, 0% probability of paternity. Caleb Doyle, 0% probability of paternity. Finn Doyle, 0% probability of paternity. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those words. Maybe an hour. Maybe a lifetime. There it was in cold, clinical print. I was a father to no one. Mabel knocked again, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure who the hell I even was anymore. Thanks for watching. Do subscribe in case you forgot to, and do tell me in the comment where you are watching from.